Hey everybody, welcome back to the Somm TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. On today's show, I interview Leslie and Rich Frank, proprietors of Frank Family Vineyards up in Napa. These two, I don't know why they went and started a winery. They had a very comfy, wonderful retirement going, and they didn't have to mess it up with all of this chaos, but they did, and they also make some pretty damn good wine. They are the subjects of the premiere episode of Blind Tasting Sessions Season 3, which is all married spouses in the wine business. But these aren't any just ordinary spouses in the wine business. This is one of the most famous studio heads. He worked for Disney for quite a while, Rich Frank, and is responsible for some of the biggest movies and TV shows that you have ever heard of. And his wife, Leslie Frank, is a very famous newscaster in her own right, award-winning, the whole deal, every major event of the last, 20 years or so. As far as what we talk about, we get off topic a little bit, but it starts with wine. We talk about Hollywood, we talk about his career and his path and how they ended up getting into starting a winery and how it works as a husband and wife. I hope all of you have tuned into the Blind Tasting Sessions season premiere. There is another episode now up. I hope you are enjoying this season because we have a lot more coming. Also, the new season of Verticals, the next episode is coming very soon next week. I hope you enjoyed the first episode on Maya Kamis. Next episode is on Paul Hobbs, and it takes place globally. Without further ado, my conversation with Rich and Leslie Frank. All right, so I am sitting here. The sun is setting in Napa. I am at the Winston Hill Vineyard of the Frank Family Winery. This is a very impromptu podcast here. We just got done with Blind Tasting Sessions. I am with Leslie and Rich Frank. You two, husband and wife team. How you doing? Good?
We're doing great.
Doing great. We've had a lot of wine.
How can you be bad to be up here in Napa in the winter in January and the temperature's 70 degrees?
No, I mean, it's incredible.
And the sun is out.
And we have, what do we have? We're drinking an 04 Flowers Pinot. We have a Penfolds Grange.
Right.
We have your 2011 Cab. This is an interesting, I'm not entirely sure how we conned you into doing a blind tasting sessions, and I want to get into who exactly you guys are.
Talk to Leslie.
Yeah. But I will say, this is, for people who subscribe to Somm TV and obviously listen to this podcast, it's one of our flagship shows, and this might be one of my favorite episodes I've ever directed.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, because you guys are freaking hilarious. And so I want to try to set who the hell you two are. And it's tough because, all right, so Rich, you are somebody that's very, you're easy and difficult to give an introduction to.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, exactly. I live in Los Angeles and I am surrounded by bullshit. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody thinks they've done everything.
The bullshit capital of the world.
Bullshit capital of the world. Here's the difference. Rich, you really actually know, you know Spielberg and you know actors and you ran Disney as the president for how long?
10 years.
10 years. During the...
I went over with Michael Eisner and Katzenberg. We were all at Paramount before, and then Frank Wells came with us from Warner Brothers, and we were sort of the Three Musketeers and D'Artagnan together.
So if you're a listener and you liked, Little Mermaid, and let's name some films you were a part of and some series when you were working there.
On the animation side, I was at Disney from Little Mermaid to Lion King. That was sort of the span we were there, which I think, again, Jeffrey Katzenberg really drove the production of that thing, but I was there during that, and then from the first movie we made, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, all the way...
Pretty Woman?
Yeah, Pretty Woman, and
Dead Poets
my
Society.
favorite is Dead Poets Society. That one was...
Good Morning Vietnam.
Good Morning Vietnam. We had an unbelievable run, and an unbelievable run as a group of friends that were just...
So basically what you did is you made a ton of money, and then you said, I want to lose all that money. I want to lose all that money and come and create a vineyard.
Right.
It seems like the fastest way to lose it. All right, so then, and your wife here is it safe to say one of the more or the most lauded journalists? I mean, you really are, as far as an on-camera presence, right? How do we set you up as far as...
Well, I'm going to space for her. With Leslie, it's real. She decided that she would give her life to her career. And that's really saying something because, before we met, she wasn't married. She didn't have children. She went, and it was her career. She worked her way, she's originally from Canada, and she worked her way across Canada, working in major markets and anchoring the news in Calgary and anchoring the news in Edmonton. I don't think you can get any colder than that. Maybe you can anchor the news in the North Pole. And then she went to Seattle, and that's when Fox affiliates were starting news.
Yeah.
And she started the news in Seattle and won the Emmy for being the outstanding news anchor there. And then she went to L.A., where ABC, Channel 7.
Nice, easy market. LA.
Yeah. Well, it was the second largest market in the country. And
Number one station.
I happen to know she was anchoring and reporting. And if it was something special, Leslie was the one who got put on the plane to get there.
On that, so people can have a kind of an idea. Name some of the big things that you've covered, and obviously you've won awards and everything. I just want people listening to understand who I'm talking to.
So I grew up in Canada. I grew up outside of Toronto. I studied journalism. I graduated from journalism and was thrown right into my first job working in a small TV market outside of Toronto, and worked my way across Canada in various markets, as Rich said. 1998, moved to Seattle. Always wanted to be in the U.S. You know, Canadians have an inferiority complex. We think everything in the States is bigger and better. And
not anymore.
That was then. Again, 1998. And so I was super excited to move to the States, move to the U.S. And, you know, I was 30 when I moved to the U.S., so you can do the math on that. No youngster anymore, but spent 7 years in the Seattle market, moved to Los Angeles, KABC, number one station, number two market. And I was a general assignment fill-in anchor, and I did it all. And I had a great run. Fortunately for me, along the way, I met the man of my dreams and my husband, Rich, who's sitting here. And who knew that my life would transition and I would be sitting in Napa Valley as a proprietor of a winery. But that's life, and you never know, and you seize the moment and take those opportunities and you run with them. And Rich and I had an opportunity together, and we decided together that we would make our life in Napa, and we focused solely on the winery the last decade or so, and we're sitting back and we're enjoying the labors of our, labor of love.
A lot of people don't know, but the Christina Applegate character in Anchorman is based on you.
Yeah.
That's true, right?
I hope not. But I was in New York on 9/11, and that was, life-changing for me, because that's when I was put to the ultimate test as a journalist, to keep, sort of try to keep your emotions in check and report the story, and that was just an overwhelming experience for the nation and the world. So, I had a lot of growing up to do at that point, and I grew up fast as a professional. And, I covered Katrina and being in, being there, for weeks on end.
You had no place to stay. You were driving hours to cover
there are many stories to tell about that, but it's a wine podcast.
So I guess the thing I wanted to set up was, I am here with somebody who is actually one of the very few people who actually know their shit in Hollywood, who are not full of it. You guys have a very well-regarded wine up here in Napa. We just got done. I do implore everybody here, you have to watch the blind tasting sessions with them. Oh my God. It's hysterical.
Was it that bad?
It was hysterical, and it is really,
it's
really,
comic
really...
relief.
I can't possibly recommend it enough, because you two are insanely great characters. So what we want to do here is talk about some stories in Hollywood, entertainment, and other things that involve wine. And I know we're going to go all over the place, but I also know that, alcohol is a hell of a thing. And wine is alcohol. Let's not mince words. So,
and we've been drinking for a while.
And we've been drinking for a bit here. And it's the only way I could get people like you to sit down and tell me stories. So what I want to do is kind of start, without going too deep, what is the wine scene in Hollywood? From when you're greenlighting television shows, when you're greenlighting films, you're behind things like Pretty Woman and things. How much of this happens over wine? And how much of this is something where wine actually plays a part? Because you probably get a chance to taste quite a...
Yeah, but not as much as you would think. I don't want to say that people in Hollywood don't drink wine. They probably do. Aside from a number of them that I know, many of them don't drink good wine. Many of them drink things that are not wine to feel better. But it was as nice as I could say that.
We're going to get ourselves in trouble here, aren't we?
I know, I'm not going to.
It's okay, he's out of the entertainment world now.
I think that aside from a given group or two in Hollywood, most people in Hollywood really don't enjoy and understand wine like people would think they should with the money they have to be able to buy the wines they could buy or learn it. I think they drink what's put in front of them. Most of the wine they drink is given to them at some dinner they're at by somebody trying to promote their wine. I won't say I never did that. Certainly when we got started, and I was on the board of the American Film Institute, and I still am. I'm still one of the vice chairman of the American Film Institute. And at the beginning when we did our Life Achievement Awards, I certainly donated our wine to the dinner because I wanted it to be better than the wine that we would normally be buying. And I was happy for all my friends in Hollywood to be able to taste it. Unfortunately, the dinners became too big and I was giving away too much wine, so we stopped that. But it was...
Except for our table.
Yes, our table.
We always managed to...
We managed to always sneak in a case
Smuggle in
under
a
the
case.
table, even
Exactly.
at the American Film Institute Life Achievement Awards. And I can tell you, it was a way to get a lot of my friends who were at other tables to come over and say hello to me. Because they would walk over with an empty glass and go, I know you have something here.
Well, so who does know wine? Who is like, if you were going to pick some people that you work with and you have worked with in the past, you got a frog over there. Who does know wine that people would have heard of?
Kevin Riley
Kevin
knows
Riley,
wine.
yeah, definitely.
Michael
likes wine.
Wright knows
Michael
wine.
Wright, yeah. Go ahead.
These are studio executives.
Yes.
Any? Well, yeah, I would expect executives. They're like doctors almost. But all right. So what about actors, actresses?
You know,
you go to Cannes.
I
Cannes
saw
Film
Jennifer
Festival.
Garner on her Instagram promoting Winston Hill. She had a bottle of Winston Hill not too long ago.
Right.
Now, whether somebody gave it to her and she has no idea what it is, I don't know.
So you're telling me
but-
all the times that you have been to the Cannes Film Festival and you have been to, all these insane award dinners and all these things and all these meetings and such. There's not a person in your circle that actually knows their stuff when it comes to wine?
very few. They drink what you put in front of them. If I'm at,
Well, I'm drinking what you put in front of me.
well, when I gave you the good stuff.
Yeah.
If you're drinking and you go to Moulin du Majan in the south of France in Cannes during one of the festivals, the people at your table will drink what you order for a few reasons. One, you're paying the bill. And second, they really don't know wines. Some of them do. I don't want to make a broad statement because at my age,
Too late.
I don't remember all of what they've done. But no, it's not a group that treasures wine. There is a number that they're off and on. There's been various wine groups that get together once a month and taste wine and do that, but not a lot that I've seen. Now, I'm sure I will get calls from friends in Hollywood who say, I love wine and we had great wine together. But in general, it's not something that's out there that everybody's sort of running after. I know it doesn't sound like it should be that way. And there are some that really do like wines, but it's not something that I would say, oh, this actor or this actress or this director or this producer is really into this.
Okay, so then how the hell did you get into wine then?
For me, it was when I would go over to Europe and when I would go back to Paramount days and I was president of television. Well, we were making Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, Cheers, Family Ties. We were making all these shows that every international station wanted. So of course, the head of the BBC would take me to dinner, or the head of TF1, or in any country. We would have a great dinner. They would order great wines. It wasn't the time that I could go to my phone and hit an app and see what the label was like and get a review. There was the label. So I would nicely say to the Som, do me a favor and get me that label. They would go in the kitchen and soak it, and it would come off the bottle, and they'd give it to me on a nice piece of wax paper, and I would take it home to LA, and I would go to whatever store I was buying at the time and see if I could get a bottle or two, have another one when I wasn't in that situation, and put one in my cellar. And I started learning about wine because of the business and being treated by people to great wines. They never ordered a bad wine at dinner. If God knows, you don't get cheers if you give me a bad wine. So, it worked out great. And I found out, for example, I really liked Bordeaux's. I didn't like Burgundies as well.
You're the only person I've ever heard say I don't like Burgundies.
I don't dislike them, but I like the Bordeaux's better.
Right.
You're a cab guy.
I'm a
You
cab
like
guy.
it.
Which makes
my
sense. I mean,
palate.
I'm tasting your wine right now.
Yeah. We make a great Pinot, but
And Chardonnay.
Chardonnay, but I wouldn't put the Pinot up against the great Burgundies in France. And I mean, what people forget is we call everything by the grape. They call everything by the region. You're drinking wines from France in Bordeaux. You don't know what you're drinking in that bottle. Nobody knows what's in Cheval Blanc versus what's in Aubryon. I mean, you may know if you're in the business, but it's not on that label. They're not telling you.
No.
Now, why do they do that? They do that because the weather's not as good as it is in California. And every year, some grapes develop better than others, and they want to be able to make the blend that they want to make that's best for that year. We don't have that here. We are blessed in Napa. I mean, we complain about one vintage versus the other. What did Mother Nature give me this year? There was too much rain. This year, there's not enough rain. You have to go out of your way to find a bad wine in Napa. You may like one better than another. Nobody's making bad wine up here. They're great winemakers. We have great fruit. It's different. So you learn as you go along, and I believe you only learn from drinking, and I don't believe we study. We've done the WSET. We've done all of those kind of things. We blind taste all the time. I think the only way you know about wines is you drink them, you taste them, you hope somebody opens a great bottle that you haven't had. It makes your night. It becomes a social event.
Yeah.
And something that makes your dinner better, and you learn.
Can I ask you a question, Leslie?
Sure.
So this guy's run studios for years and years and years. Is he always this intense? I mean, has he been able to turn it off?
One of the many reasons why I love Rich and I married him is because he is authentic, and what you see is what you get. And I think we're both that way. He's had a giant career in the entertainment world, with a list of movies and television shows that he's associated with that are mind-blowing. But at the end of the day, he's Rich Frank, and he's a solid, stable human being with incredible smarts. Not a day goes by that I'm not wowed by his
First of all, I hope my wife
knowledge.
is listening to this, by the way. I would like my wife to say something like this.
I hope you come and do a pod every week because I'm getting compliments that I don't usually get.
Usually I'm like, did you feed the dog? Did you walk him? Yeah, exactly.
Did you give him his pills
Did you
this
give him his
morning?
medication? Yeah, exactly.
Oh, boy.
No, but I mean, God, Rich is one of a kind, and I'm unbelievably blessed to have him in my life and have him as my husband. But he is, not a day goes by that he doesn't make me laugh either. And I think the reason we're just kind of simpatico is that we take things seriously, but we don't take ourselves seriously. And at the end of the day, my God, we're making wine. We're making wine for people to enjoy. Yes, it's a business. And by the way, it's a profitable business.
Is it really?
Well, it certainly can be when you have somebody at the helm with my husband's smarts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fair.
Yes, it can be.
When we came up here, my whole life was corporate. Wherever I worked, it was a big corporation. So when I started out, and it was an advertising agency, BBDO,
Mad Men.
Mad Men. I was there when Mad Men. That's when I was at
The
BBDO.
real Mad Men.
Yes. So I went from that. I went to Chris Craft Industries, which owned television stations. I went to Paramount, which was owned by Gulf and Western. I went to Disney. Big corporations.
Huge.
What did I know how to do? 5-year projections, run out dates, release dates, marketing dates, all that. If you take it back, it's the same as the wine business. When I cut up here, and I would say to people, well, what are you projecting for 4 years from now? What are you going to do in 5 years? They go, what do you mean in 5 years? I'm worrying about this year. And I go, yeah, but if you grow too fast in the wine business, you put yourself out of business because it's 4 or 5 years before you get your first grapes. It's 3 years on any cab sitting on some shelf someplace. So you've spent money for 8 years before you get the first dollar back. Now, if you start selling a lot, you're out of wine before that. You have to live this business on cash flow, not from what you would do, P&L statements from everything else. But I knew that, I learned it, I didn't think about it. I certainly wasn't an accounting major. To me it was like the accounting course I had to do was, credit the window and debit the door when you were facing the front. Which column you put in, that's all I knew. But I learned through having to do it, and I put it to use here, and it's paid off because we were able to plan ahead. We know how many grapes we have to buy for next year, how many tons to make for 2 years from now. What do we want to use in the blends? And that's where people like my winemaker Todd Graff is fantastic. He's able to say, we're low 2 years from now on Pinot. We need to get more of this. We have too much Cabernet in the house.
And that's all based on growth, or that's all based on...
You project your growth and you project what you need, and then Mother Nature mixes
and
it up.
Mother Nature gives you the answer.
That's the other problem. But I guess every business has a Mother Nature. Sure. Everybody has something that's like that. And look, we've documented a lot of swings. In fact, I'm filming something that has to do with war right now, and that's, semi-predictable, but, not... You can't predict fires. You can't predict... This stuff it is what it is, but I will say, this wine I'm drinking right now is absolutely freaking amazing.
So,
it's really, you're definitely doing something right.
So what's so interesting about that is I just happen to have that like in the kitchen, the 2011. And 2011, as you recall, was not recognized as a stellar vintage at the time. And obviously not the most optimal growing conditions. We had a lot of rain that year.
Yeah, I was very wet. That's right. All I know about 2011.
And so it just, at the time when we released the 11s, we were thinking, oh gosh, nobody, the critics were not favorable to the 11s, and that didn't help the Napa Cabernet market. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, we started getting calls from all the restaurants saying, these 11s are drinking phenomenally. We want the 11s. Do you have any 11s? We're like, yeah, as a matter of fact, we do. Now we don't. I mean, we've sold out of our 11s, but that just goes to show you how, how Napa is such an interesting place. At one point, a vintage that is not the most celebrated becomes a celebrated vintage. So I thought I would pull this out because it's kind of interesting. It was in the kitchen with some other vintages and.
Okay. So I think that the blind tasting sessions that we're doing is all based on spouses. Everybody's married to each other, which I work with my wife. Her and I have not made anything that is worth watching that wasn't with her involvement. She is the most talented story mind I've ever met. She's also not nice in the editing room. I'm not gonna lie. She can bite. What is it like for you guys to work as a married couple? I think in the wine business,
I'll be heading back to the house now.
Why don't you ask the question? How is it for you guys to work together as a married couple during COVID?
Yeah, that's its own thing. I mean, that's
yeah. Okay.
But you find in the wine business. I mean, traveling. We travel to France and Spain and Italy. You do find more husband and wife teams, in my opinion, than a lot of other businesses. You don't find a lot of filmmaking teams that are husband and wife. You don't find a lot of, I'm just curious, but within this, you guys have, I guess, one of the problems with Napa is a very expensive place to make wine.
Sure.
It's, you have a lot of pressure you're relying on, like you said, critics. I mean, you're not relying on, it's not just, objectively is it good, it's subjectively is it good. Right. And like you said with 2011, this is amazing, but it took 10 years for people to realize.
Yeah.
What is it like to have to deal with all that?
So
and be married.
Let's go back to the husband and wife thing. I think the reason it works so well for Rich and me is because we both have a great sense of humor, and I find the humor in him and he finds the humor in me. And even when I'm not at my most humorous, he will remind me of that, which in itself is humorous. Does that make sense? So
I'm reading between the lines, yes.
We each have our distinct roles. Rich is a businessman. I mean, he's a businessman, and he understands numbers, and he knows how to run an operation, and he has taught me so much. I mean, that was not my world, but what I think I brought to the table is some knowledge with my communications background and journalism background, with the branding, with the marketing, with social media and just what is our look, what is our image, what is our message, and presenting that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my area, and he's the numbers guy and he's the business guy. So we have very distinct roles at the winery, and then together, we're both involved in the hospitality because we're both very social people. Rich coming from a Disney background, at Disney, you're not a customer, you're a guest. Well, at Frank Family Vineyards, you're not a customer, you're a guest.
And apparently they pour Grange when you show up.
No, we don't pour Grange, but we pour great Frank Family wines. And, it's not about the hard sell. We want people to come to the winery and have a great experience, because are they going to spend that day? Maybe they're going to spend and maybe they won't. But if they walk away and they go, you know what, I really enjoyed the wines and I had a fantastic experience. One of these days, they're going to be in their grocery store or their restaurant or wherever they are, and they're going to see a bottle of Frank Family, and that's going to resonate with them. So the payoff may not be, they're going to tell their friends, exactly. They're going to spread the word. So it may not be an immediate payoff, maybe down the road, but that's the way we've built our business over 28 years.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that you can toss money at something in Napa and that's like what, 20% of whether it'll be successful or not is if you have the funding to do it.
Right.
Napa is now suffering from what I think Bordeaux has dealt with for a long time, in that there's a lot of producers, and how do you stand out and how do you become known?
That's a great question.
They even had their problems because of the laws over there. If they had a vineyard like Winston Hill, when the father died and you had two sons, it would be split in half. When each of them died, it would be split 3 ways, 4 ways. So you end up in France, depending on the region and all of that, with people owning 2 rows of this.
Or half a row.
Or half a row, and this guy wants to farm organically, and this guy doesn't, and yet the names are the same, and it's hard to really develop your own. It's really a brand that it becomes, because it's very hard. A lot of these wines are so similar, and not because they choose it. It's just how the land has been split up because of the way the laws are over there, and so it's really changed as you look at it. It's just different.
I think to your point, Jason. I think yes, there are a lot of producers in Napa Valley, and those producers, I guess, are on a scale. You have certain tiers of producers. I think we're a family-owned winery, and we're becoming more and more scarce. But it's a business that was built, when you bought a property which had vineyards, and then you sort of fell into the wine business, and you got into it with the intention of making, a couple hundred cases of Cabernet to give to your friends and family at Christmas time. And then it just sort of grew organically from there with the purchase of another vineyard and another vineyard and another, and we did that. And then, when you and I made the commitment to move here, more than a decade ago together and do this. But what I like about and I can only speak for us, but what I like about our business plan is that we make a wine that I believe is a quality wine, and it's approachable for a lot of people.
It's really good.
At a lot of price points. Well, we gave you the good
This one's
stuff.
high up. No.
This one's maybe not so.
But I've had your other wines.
Sure. So our classic tier, which you can buy at your Gelson's or your, whatever, name the grocery store. We don't say, okay, those are our less expensive wines. We don't put as much effort into that. On the contrary, if you talk to our winemaker, I've asked him on a number of occasions, what's the most difficult wine that you make? And he would say, it's our classic tier wines, because we make more of those. And in order to have the quality and the consistency from year to year, it takes more. It takes more effort. You got a great vineyard here in the middle of Rutherford, Hillside Vineyard, Winston Hill, where we do our single vineyard wines, the Winston Hill wine. We make a Patriarch, which is a specific block off of this vineyard, which is 100% Cabernet. And those are our highest price point wines. But if you ask Todd, he'll say those, for me, are the easiest wines to make.
Because he's making 250 cases of that and not 20,000 cases of something else.
That's fair.
So
it's there. But also, just to touch on your stuff, one of the questions just triggered in my mind, because Yes, we're in a business where there are a number of people who call themselves critics, who tell you how good you did on every one of your SKUs,
Sounds a lot like the film business.
Yes. Well, I'm going to tell you that story because when I was at Disney, we owned Siskel and Ebert, and we developed that show. And
that's not a conflict of interest.
Here was the agreement we had. And I knew Roger Ebert from University of Illinois because he was the editor of the Daily Illini when I was there. And the agreement was, you two can do whatever you want, and we'll never talk about your reviews. But once a year, as friends, the three of us went out to dinner, and we each brought a great bottle of wine, because they did like wine, and we could say anything we wanted to each other, and then the next day it went back to where it was. And I remember when I sat there and said to them, because they both gave thumbs down to Pretty Woman, and I said to them, okay, guys, I will tell you, if you do something like that again, you're out of business next year. Not because I'm going to put you out of business, but everybody in America loves that movie. And if you don't like it, they're not going to believe you on other movies.
They both went thumbs down on Pretty Woman?
Yeah. Now, I can tell you that...
I really like Ebert. He's had some misses.
Yeah, well...
he didn't like Butch Cassidy's Sundance Kid.
No, look, I have no problem with people having opinions. I have problems with people telling people that they drink wines blind, and I don't believe any of them do.
Most of the critics do not.
They look back, what did I give this person last year? Who's the winemaker? Who's growing the vineyard? What did they do before? How little wine do they make? And there the rating comes. Oh, I gave this a 90 last year. It's a better vineyard. I'll give it a 91. I do not believe...
It's objective.
It's objective. And I will take all the grief that your podcast now gives for that. We do fine with the ratings.
I'm going to tell you right now, I completely agree. I don't disagree with you. I know for a fact. Now, there are some critics who are quite good, but a lot of them, I will also tell you, are exactly what you just said.
Well, they cannot...
Mind you, when they give us a 98, I think they're right on.
Yes, when it's a great rating, it's good.
When it's a great rating.
As a filmmaker, I also understand.
But think about this job. You have to taste 150 wines today for the Cabernet issue.
Yeah, well, that's
And
stupid.
I said
That's
to one of the
thing I've heard in my life.
I said to one of the critics, would I rather be the wine you taste following a great wine or following a terrible wine?
And
I think that's a good question.
I would say, why the hell
are
are you tasting 150 wines in a day?
Well, and the answer was, but here's the answer. It was because I have a perfect palate.
It didn't matter.
And that answered everything I ever needed to do. So I love to get a good rating. Right. I don't like it when I get a bad rating.
Right.
But we don't live on the ratings. I'd rather you taste my wine and...
And the same critic, I asked the question, why don't you taste blind? And the answer was, because I need a point of reference. And I'm thinking, well, if you're a critic, why do you need a point of reference? Because last year's vintage may not be anything similar to this year's vintage.
I always circular go. My place to look is from film. I think Pretty Woman is a perfect example of when you look at somebody who has to review Pretty Woman and Transformers, and then The Thin Red Line, and then Master and Commander, and then Terminator, and then Caddyshack.
Right.
Those are apples and volleyballs. And so the problem is, you're still a film critic. And the problem I find with wine is people haven't looked at it that way. They haven't said, there are genres. They go, what grapes are there? But there are also, you have a responsibility, like you said, to not have, look, if you're a film critic, you go, I mean, Pauline Kael has given horrible reviews to some of the greatest movies ever made, but she's wrong. It's just the fact of the matter. She's wrong. And so, like, when you look at some wine critics who will say, they create these scales that are not based on, you know, it's like an 89 is a bad score, an 88's a bad score out of 100. It makes no sense. To me, it's like, this stuff makes no sense. And you're right. They should not need this point of reference. Is there a Citizen Kane in wine? I'm serious. Is there? Is there a Alien? Is there because wine reviewing for me is very similar to film. Film critics get their asses handed to them 20 years later. You know, I mean, there's a pretty serious thing when a film goes on to change the world and spawn 10 sequels, and, you know, the person who gave Godfather 2 a bad review is an idiot. You're just wrong.
Well, yes, and then you have the moments, whether I'll just pick one that changed society only because of theirs. You get a $3 million film, production cost, of a film like Saturday Night Fever.
That John Badham was my teacher and my directing teacher.
It changes the entire culture because of a movie and a moment. And you look for those that there are those that do that. You don't know when they're coming out. Literally, that movie cost about $3 million to make. And John Travolta was
but it's lighting in a
one of the
too.
Stars on Cotter.
Rich,
you know?
you have to talk about the connection and how
Well, I'm
your
mentioning it
involvement with that
because
movie.
I was called into, when I was at Paramount, Barry Diller's office when he said, we just saw one of the best films we made and we don't know how to market it and we don't know how to get any attention. And go in the screening room and look at it. And it was Saturday Night Fever. And I looked at it and I couldn't figure out how to get it out there. And we developed the idea to shoot the premiere, stage an opening that the world could look in on, because they always heard about Hollywood parties. And at that party have the Bee Gees sing a song and have introduced John Travolta and all that, and barter it to the TV station so that on Thursday night before it opened, it ran all over America. I can go for days to tell you how hard it was to get that done and approved, but we did that. And the movie opened giantly. And we subsequently did a whole number of those types of things. But it was a way to do it. And that movie, because of that moment, later that year, Barry Diller came to me and said, I want you to run all of television at Paramount because
you thought,
got it
you
on
thought
that.
in a new way.
I thought differently, and I didn't know it was going to work. I just thought that was a good idea at the time.
If you look at, now I know we're tangentially into movies, and that's my fault, but I will say, if you look at that particular film, Saturday Night Fever, and you look at the soundtrack, it's probably, I mean, look, I'm a younger man. I don't have a tenth or a thousandth of the experience you have in the business, but when you look at that, and then you look at, you know, Harold and Maude with Cat Stevens, or you look at The Graduate with Simon and Garfunkel, right, and you look at just what the music in a film did and changed forever. These are the movies. I mean, Saturday Night Fever's soundtrack is one of the most seminal pieces of a grouping of music that's ever happened, and it changed the world. It wasn't just that.
Right. I will tell you, this is the bad part of the business side of it. The only studio that didn't own a music label was Paramount. And we did, in a succession of 2 years, Saturday Night Fever, Urban Cowboy, Footloose, and Grease. Oh. And we owned none of those movies. And now, you want to talk about where the music made more than the movie? You're right there. And we did not own a record label.
So, bringing this back to wine, I mean, it goes to show, like, your strengths in having to look around the corner to figure out how to market something. I mean, Saturday Night Fever, I still think if you were to watch that movie, you'd go, I love this, I don't know how to sell it.
We watched it again not too long ago.
Some of the greatest, so I had a directing class, and John Badham was the teacher at Chapman University, and he basically said to us that he directed that film without realizing what he was doing, meaning like it just happened. And listening to that man speak about directing taught me more about the business than actually standing behind a camera and saying, here's how you direct, because it really doesn't happen the way you think. And I think winemaking is very similar to this.
Well, I'm going to just one more, and then I'll get off of it. We're probably going into the mini-series part of your podcast. But the movie that I'm proudest to have been involved with was a movie called Dead Poets Society.
I want Peter Weir to make another film so bad, I can't even tell you.
It almost didn't get made because nobody wanted to act in it. We couldn't get anybody to direct in it, and I don't have enough time to tell you the whole story. And the script was
Tom
written...
Schulman, who wrote it? Tom Schulman?
Yeah, and the movie he had done just before that, which is why I couldn't get anybody to read it, called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So nobody believed that guy, by the way, that was a brilliant movie, could write something serious. And we ended up getting Robin Williams, and it became what it was. I believe that was a movie that changed a lot of fathers' in America. I don't believe we see father-son love stories very much. And the thing that got me, I was having lunch after playing a round of golf, and I had somebody from the club come over. And we were sitting there adding up who won and lost and what we were doing. And he said, "Thank you." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "I'm going to raise my son differently." And I said to him, "I think thank you, but that's not the world I'm in. But if it had that effect on you, that's important. But I'm in the entertainment business." But to your point before on Saturday Night Fever, you're in the entertainment business, but it's a lot to do with society and what's happening and the world and discovering things. And I know you're into documentaries.
And that's like vintages, though.
Nothing more important than documentaries. It's not as well paid. It's not as well respected.
Wait, no, not as well paid. It's not paid at all.
Right. But it's how we get so much of our information. It's how we get it honestly. You could argue whether this one has a lean this way or that way. You should have a point of view if you're doing a documentary. But we have film, television, music drives the world's feelings, and it's important. And even if we don't think it's important the day we're doing it, or we just want to laugh for an hour, or we just want to cry for an hour, that's important. What we give you with wine is we present you with the opportunity to share it with somebody during something. Most people, we don't make wines that are on the bottom two shelves that you're going to just drink out of a box or pay $3 or $4 for. You're going to buy this, you're going to share this at dinner with somebody. Hopefully it makes your dinner better. I doubt if it's going to change your life. But if you talk about it and it makes you feel a little better, then I'm happy. I don't need to know about it. It's not why I'm doing it. We just want to do something that we think is good, we make money on, is a value to you when you're buying it relative to something else.
And yet, I have been around dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of stories where wine has done exactly what you said about entertainment to people. Has changed their lives. It has, and the other thing too is like sometimes a bottle of wine at a table is the little match that makes you fall in love with the person across from you.
And that's where we started, to take this thing full circle.
Are we going back to the 2004 Flowers Pinot Noir?
Which, spoiler alert, is one of the wines in the blind tasting sessions. But you know, it is an insane pleasure to talk to you two. I think you're both crazy. I just want to be frank.
You
Frank
have to be
wines.
crazy in this world to survive.
Well, especially if you're going to try to make wine anywhere. I think wine is. But I think it's interesting the way the way you look at wine as projections and these things. But it's an interesting balance between nature and what your responsibility is to keep going, and that's interesting.
Look, I will, and the only thing I'll tie it up with, the winemaker is the director. He wants to make it as good as he can, as great as he can, and the producer is the owner, and he wants to make sure that he can make enough money that you can keep on doing your job, making this. It takes both ends. I never will take away from the artistic ability of a writer or a director or a winemaker or an assistant winemaker or cellar master in doing their craft. And you see it in the people you hire. You see it more than anybody because you're actually producing things in the wine business. So you're the one crossing over all of this.
Yeah, well, you know, it's I'm too drunk to notice.
That's another problem.
But if I can sum it up, I just want to say that, well, you've gotten a taste of the authentic Rich Frank. And Rich has the most amazing stories, and I've heard them numerous times, and I am in awe every time I listen to my husband tell these stories because you are one of a kind, and you are.
If you want to do another one when you come back, I'll tell you the story about Pope John Paul.
But you gotta wait for that one.
Teaser?
You gotta wait for that one.
I look forward to it.
No, we're really lucky. We make wine in Napa. We make enough to sell in all states, and we make them at all different price points, and we love what we do. We are truly blessed to be in Napa, to be on this property, and to be enjoying the fruits of our labor, and not just ours, but our neighbors. You know, we have
Close
really good
community.
friends and fellow vintners that we spend a lot of time with in this community, and it's a charitable community, first and foremost, and we're involved in that, and we're fortunate to be able to give back to the community, and it's a good situation. We don't take it for granted, and we just, we look forward to 2021 because we think we're nearing the end of this crazy COVID nightmare, and just reopening our business to people. And
It's almost 1 year ago that we've all been confined. It's hard to believe the year that we've all gone through.
It's crazy.
Well, cheers to a better year. And you two, man, I can't wait to have another glass with you again.
Cheers.
We have much more.
To John Paul. We'll talk about that
There
later.
you go.
All right, you two. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Really means a lot. Make sure you please go to the App Store, however you listen to this, and review our podcast. Give us 5 stars. Yeah, only review it if you're going to give us 5 stars. Mom, I'm talking to you because I know you are the only one still listening. And also, please review SomTV. SomTV.com. It's available on almost every device. Any app you have on a major smart TV or anything like that, $49.99 for the year. We love and adore you subscribers. Please give us a review. It helps keep us going and helps us bring more content to you. All right, everybody, please be safe. And I can't wait to see you out and about when we're all vaccinated.